not really trying to hide this at this point, that they look at these autocrats, these dictator-like people, these white supremacist leaders as role models. That's what they're trying to remake this country. When they say, let's make America great again, what they mean by that is to take us back to a place where people who look like you and me are devalued, where people are not seen as equal, where women don't have the same rights, where people of color are less than their white counterparts. That's what they mean by going back. And they're not even trying to hide it. When you give a standing ovation at a major political conference to someone like this, you might as well just, you're basically taking your hood off for everybody to see this is who you are. And they're being very, very blunt about it. And I think it's time that when we talk about the Republican Party, we cannot divorce them now from the white nationalist racist elements that are overrunning them.
Christina, do you think this is a consequence of basically Donald Trump normalizing racism and bigotry and just making it perfectly okay and acceptable in mainstream spaces to be overtly racist?
Absolutely, Zerlina. He excavated what has always been a factor in this country. Don't forget, we are founded on white supremacy and anti-Black racism, capitalism, and patriarchy, as Bell Hooks has always told us. And so what Donald Trump has done is just brought it to the surface and made it okay for people to say, you know what, actually, I don't want actually people of color in my schools and my neighborhoods. I don't want women, as leaders. And, there's so many mediocre people who have been able to excel in this country for centuries. And now that there's a modicum of competition, now it all of a sudden seems like inequity. And so Donald Trump has made it such that this is, the party of victimhood. This is the party of people who feel as though they're aggrieved. And so as he has people marching in Charlottesville and says they're very fine people, we must remember that this is a man who came down a gold-plated escalator and said that Mexicans were rapists. And there were, 75 million people who were just fine to vote for him, to say, oh, it's the tax breaks. I don't really think the racism is real. Well, it's actually real. And we've seen it time and time again. We've had enough years and enough instances of Donald Trump and his ilk doubling down on racism and white supremacy. So if you are a Republican, you can no longer hide behind the tax breaks. You are in for a penny and in for a pound, and you now support the party of white supremacists. That's plain and simple. That's where we are.
Yeah, I don't know where we got this idea that if you vote for a candidate that says racist things, that somehow you don't own that. You don't get to accept any responsibility for that decision that you made to support that person. And Kurt, to that point Christina just made about the changing demographics and the feeling that some white Americans have that they're losing something, in his book, A Way Out of No Way, excuse me, Senator Raphael Warnock writes, the former president's continued claims of widespread voter fraud are just his way of saying that the votes of certain people can't count, and can't be real because the election outcome was not consistent with the myth of white supremacy. So, Kurt, talk about that. Talk about the fact that basically this is a result of the changing demographics and the fact that white voters eventually will be a minority of the voters.
Towards the end of the Obama administration, the Census Bureau came out and said that by 2035, we're going to be a majority country in this country. And that really terrified the Republican Party. They realized that their years of attacking minorities, their years of anti-immigrant policies, their years of suppressing and demoralizing anyone who didn't look like them, that was an electoral defeat that was going to be baked into the demographics. So they came up with a plan, and that plan was very simple. What if we don't let those people vote? What if we make it harder for them to vote? What if we do everything we can to discourage them from participating in the democratic process? Because they know that when the playing field is equal and all things are level, they lose. They lost in 2018. They lost in 2020. They lost in the Georgia special election. So what did they do after having the most fair and the most open and the most recounted election in recent memory? They went out and passed a bunch of anti-voter suppression laws. They went out and made it harder for people to participate in the democratic process. And the people that they made it harder for, they weren't the white people. They were people who look like you and me. There are people that they're trying to disenfranchise and make sure that they don't get to participate in the process. That's why I say over and over again, this November election, this midterm election could very well be the last free and fair election we have in America.